Hello, and welcome to the Product Insiders LinkedIn Live series, in which we interview product leaders and learn how they leverage customer insights to navigate tough product decisions. I'm your host, Zach Lyons, Managing Partner of Agile Innovation Advisors. If you're joining us live today, can you please enter where you are from in the chat so we know who is with us? Today, our special guest is Matt Collins, Head of Product Marketing at Mountain. And we'll be asking Matt some questions, but if you have any specific questions for him, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them in a bit. So with that, let's begin. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Zach, it's great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So the first question I have for you is, thinking back in your career around a tough product decision that you had to navigate, can you please tell us about your role at the time and the situation?
Sure, be happy to. This topic, I think, really stretched me a bit, and in part because I feel as if, for the most part, the decisions that I've been fortunate enough to be able to make have, I think, been, I won't say easier, but they haven't been as confounding as the situation that I'm about to describe to you. The context here is that I was working by the way, backing up, I work in ad tech, and I've been in ad tech since 2015, so almost 9 years now. And at a previous company, not Mountain, I will say that I was involved in the launch of a all new ad tech platform, a self-service ad tech platform. And we were targeting an audience that would be new to the type of advertising that this particular platform could deliver. And we had to make some decisions about, fundamentally, that I would describe as touching on the user experience, and specifically how many steps did we want to ask users to take before they could complete their task, and what kind of information and experience did we want those consumers or those users to have along the way. And because this was an audience that was so entirely new to this particular advertising channel, we were really sort of starting from scratch, I think.
So what would you say was the biggest challenge then? I'm obviously a new audience, but what was difficult? Like, what were you trying to overcome?
We were trying to overcome at that time, a pretty distinct, inarguable reluctance by this particular audience segment to use the type of advertising that this platform would unlock. So in the past, this particular user type just hadn't used the kind of advertising that we were featuring. And I'm being a bit coy here to protect the identity of some of the of the particular product and the companies involved. But needless to say, that we were engaging an audience that had already expressed itself through its behavior as being a little reluctant about using this. And so what made this tough especially was that here we were not only trying to get them to change their minds and get them to change their minds specifically about this one particular product offering, but doing it in a way that would remove other very perhaps valid concerns, such as the kind of concerns that anyone would have about a product offering, such as it's too hard, it takes too much time, I have to learn, I have all this prerequisite learning I need to do, and there are only so many hours in the day. All the reasons that can sabotage a new product's success or momentum in the market were things that we were also dealing with at that time.
Interesting. So was this audience just new to the company or new to the category as a whole? Do you recall?
Yeah, I do. They were certainly new to the company, but I also think that they were new to the category. I'm a bit more reluctant in my characterization on the latter, because I think a lot of those customers had, I'll say, to borrow a car shopping analogy, they'd kicked the tires on this particular advertising opportunity before. but had decided for one reason or another the timing wasn't right, it wasn't for them, and didn't belong in their toolbox, and so they had passed. So I think there was some familiarity with the category, but not so much in terms of direct usage experience.
Gotcha. So what did you do? Like what kinds of insights did you gather? How did you navigate this?
Well, Zach, you'll appreciate this because our starting point was very much focused on jobs to be done.
Mm,
And so even before we started coding this platform and designing this platform, we conducted interviews with between 30 and 40, both user targets and buyer targets, customers who were representative of both of those categories, to break down in what the most exhausting level of detail I've ever experienced in my career, the jobs they needed to be done, not just in the category that we served, but in the broader category of marketing, and then also specifically performance advertising. And we pooled all that information together to get a sense, okay, here's the kind of experience that we had to deliver. And then that's what we built to. What really illuminated this, and we're going to get, I think, here in a second to the aha moment that I never saw coming, was when we actually then had a product to share, and we got users in front of that product, got them to use it all the way to swiping a credit card. So we actually found some of these people who had previously been reluctant about the category, not knowing about us as a company, to change both of those postures and use it. And that's when we got a kind of feedback that I never expected I'd ever hear.
Oh, so now I'm itching to hear what did you learn? What happened?
We were talking to one user in particular, smart person who considered himself a seasoned performance marketer. And for those watching who may not have heard that distinction, a performance marketer is typically someone working in the marketing function who is tasked with producing an outcome that either directly impacts revenue or could arguably indirectly impact revenue, such as acquiring a new customer that then perhaps later could be monetized. But they stand apart from a brand marketer who typically are focused on other important goals, such as building awareness, maximizing audience reach. So a smart person, smart marketer, well accomplished, and we sat down with him after he had used it, and we asked him, "What do you think?" And he said, "It was too easy." And he was very earnest about that. And I thought, too easy. I don't think I've ever heard this before. And we asked him to unpack that. And his explanation actually made a ton of sense. And that was that as a newbie to this platform, to this, not just a platform, but to the category, he considered himself a total novice. And he found that the number of steps and the friction that the platform had put in front of him between starting, like just creating an account, and swiping the credit card, actually buying media, felt way too lubricated. And he described getting to that point where he was ready to swipe a credit card. And he was asking himself, am I doing this right? I've never done this before. And I'm about to spend some meaningful amount of money. Is this okay? And so what he was saying to us was like, the ease of use actually made him feel a little insecure.
That's fascinating. It's the opposite of what most product marketers are struggling with.
I know.
So totally. What did you guys do? What did you do with that learning?
Well, we took heart. On the one hand, the experience really did take friction out, and we comforted ourselves with the assumption that there would be other people using the platform who were not new to the category. It might have been new to the company, but not to the category, who would have found that ease of use to be a benefit. So we were not suddenly hell-bent on trying to find ways to throw unnecessary steps into it and make the UI hard to understand. Like, we weren't going to throw artificial impediments in front of users. What we decided to do, and what we took from this, was, what the user is not really saying this is too easy. What the user is saying is, I sure would like some companionship.
Right.
and the journey. And the companionship should take the form of insight, knowledge, hand-holding, access to best practices,
Mm.
easy ways for me to get my questions answered. And so we didn't feel as the people behind the platform compelled to make these additions mandatory, but we did feel like they had to be optional and available and easily accessible by the user, so that someone who was feeling insecure, expressing it perhaps as this is too easy,
Mm.
could go and get the support they need to feel like, you know what, I can do this confidently.
Interesting. And did you guys do any kind of additional research to see if there were different users, some that wanted more handholding perhaps, and some that maybe wanted less handholding? I'm curious.
That's a
If
good
so.
question. Yeah, I honestly I don't remember if we did more research on that topic, and in part because our go-to-market campaign in support of this particular endeavor was very much focused on consumers like this person.
Okay.
So I may be guilty of, I may have been guilty of a bit of a bias in assuming that others who similarly were unfamiliar with the category, unfamiliar with the company, would have the same kind of response to a unchaperoned experience of the kind that we delivered. So we kind of we took this data point of one, which again I would not recommend relying so heavily for other product marketers. I would not recommend that particular approach, but we did that, and I will say that in subsequent interviews with other users, we came away concluding that we had found the right balance. In fact, so much so that, you know, if I can skip ahead a little bit to the punchline, to the end, like, well, what happened with all of this? We
Sure.
actually decided to take the learnings and a lot of the architecture and the user experience and from this new platform, and we pulled it into the incumbent product, a platform that was not new, and but that would benefit from much of what we had learned from this new enterprise. Eventually, we shut that project down, but we felt like it was a success anyway because we'd learned so much. We've been able to move so quickly, and we've been able to take all these insights and use them to upgrade an experience that was already driving a lot of revenue, had already found a very stable and affectionate audience for what it was able to do, and give them
Mhm.
a much better experience.
Interesting. So was there some kind of benefit or lift as far as taking the ideas from the learning and applying to the incumbent product?
Oh, for sure. Yes. I mean, anyone who's been involved with an effort to re-architect or redesign a legacy platform knows just how hard that can be. But imagine getting a head start that would come as a result of having uh, launched something similar to it, and
Mhm.
actually getting real world feedback. So we were able to, I think, shortcut all kinds of steps that we would ordinarily expect to see.
Oh,
And
interesting.
that, and by the way, that a lot of that what we did successfully in the launch of this new platform, like the jobs to be done interviews, we felt like we had kind of already done a lot of that, and we were able to bring in these new capabilities, which had other, by the way, technical benefits too, such as just efficiency gains. It operated much faster, you know, in all the sort of technical metrics. It was just these improvements made for a better experience. But it would be a lot of fun, I suppose, for me to be able to say that was the beginning of a launch of a platform that was generating all kinds of, you know, millions of dollars of ARR. But in this case, that didn't happen. But what did happen was that we were able to give put our incumbent platform on a bit of a launch pad and give it a head
Mm.
start to what it became.
Sure. It sounds to me like the new product was a good opportunity to test, to learn quickly, and then you took those learnings and were able to accelerate the incumbent product,
That's
which
right.
is a win.
Yeah, you're right. It's exactly right, Zach. It is a win. And at the time, I didn't see it that way. In fact, if I'm honest, I did feel disappointed when we decided to
Mm.
pull the plug on it. But
Sure.
through the benefit of hindsight now, I realized, no, it wasn't a failure at all. That, and in many respects, it might have counted, like if we had taken a look at the revenue, overall revenue impact and potential, being able to take an incumbent product that was already generating hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue and be able to level it up quickly, arguably delivered a better overall business performance than trying to grow something from zero to who knows what it could have become. But it, getting from zero to hundreds of millions of dollars in ARR is not something that just sort of happens overnight.
Sure. So I'm going to ask this question. You started alluding to it a little bit, but in looking back on what happened, what would you do differently if you could make that decision again, if you could go through that process again?
I would say, it's a great question, Zach. I would say the thing that I would do differently is that I would put a lot more value in these one-to-one types of conversations. I grew up in marketing, and marketing research in particular, with a heavy exposure to quantitative survey-based marketing techniques. And I remember coming to this particular job having very little qualitative market research experience. And it resulted, if I'm honest, in a bit of a bias. Like I kind of poo-pooed it. I'm like, well, all right, but how many responses are going to take to get to statistical significance? But what I realized was the benefit of being able to look a user in the eye and have a conversation, marketer to marketer, and to be able to glean something that, sure, it was not statistically significant, but it was extraordinarily useful. And so I've come to appreciate just how important it is to have both a qualitative research focus or practice to supplement any kind of quantitative research you might do.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, both have their merits, right? And so knowing when to apply one versus the other can be helpful. And what was your experience with jobs to be done? Do you feel like that was a helpful process, or would you have done something different to help you get the insights maybe faster or better or quicker? Any recommendations there?
I loved it, and I love it. I will say that I learned that getting the breadth of information that I wanted from from the users I spoke to required more time of them than they wanted to give me. And so one thing I would do differently about that process, if I had to start it over again, would be, come up with a framework of the jobs to be done, discovery work that we were going to do, right? Which we did. Road test it with like maybe 3 to 5 respondents, and then take a look and see how many of your questions did you really get through, and what was the value of the insights that you got from those questions. In my experience, and knowing me as I know myself, I'm not surprised at this. I way overpacked the suitcase by analogy. I had so many more questions in there that I was ever going to have time to ask. And so I could have making myself feel a little bit less anxious doing these interviews if I had trimmed it back after just a couple of them and seeing what the questions I was never going to get to, and quite frankly didn't really need in order to be effective. And then just not have that anxiety that can hang over, at least for me, anytime I've got a project that looks or feels like it's unfinished. So I'd come back, I'd exit these jobs to be done interviews, and I look down at my notes, and I'd realize that only 2/3 of the questions had been answered. And I look at the other third and go, oh, what did I do? How did I leave all that on the table? That's all, by the way, just I made all that up. That's my issue. But like trimming it back and just being more realistic about the time, and really like prioritizing what is it that we really need to know. And maybe there's a whole other category of like nice to know, but that's reframing that, I think, is something I would do differently.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, my experience has been be pretty open, don't have such a set agenda, listen to the customer and kind of follow their lead, because you don't know where they're going to take you. But yeah, having a set of questions puts pressure on yourself to fit them in and get them asked, and doesn't always help. So It's good advice. Doing those interviews is not easy. So there's obviously learnings along the way.
That's right. And be patient with yourself. My grandfather used to have a saying. He would say, never try anything for the first time. What he meant by that was, first time any of us go do anything, where by definition we're not experts at it, and so we're going to stub our toes. It might be sloppy, might be messy. Outcome may not be great. You need to get through to get to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And so, Zach, I'm drawn to your more flexible approach. I tend to prefer more of the structure, and I tend to like the idea of creating a guide, even just for myself, so that I know, like, here are the things that I should double down on. Here are the things I really need to get out of the conversation. I can also talk someone's ear off. And so just even like having that as a discipline to myself to, like, hey, you got to keep it moving. Like, don't spend too much time on any one of these questions, for me was helpful. But to your point, like, no matter what, whether you bring a more structured approach or whether it's more free form, really being ready to let the customer take the conversation in a direction that's useful to them will probably be useful to you.
Couldn't agree more. I want to see if there's any questions for anyone from our audience now that we've sort of hit the end of our time. If there is, you can put them in the chat. We'll get them. I know there is a slight delay between the stream and the chat. So if we don't answer them live on screen, we can continue the conversation. It is LinkedIn, so like any other post, we can continue having a conversation afterwards. Someone's excited to see you. So I don't see any questions popping in. So we can probably wrap it up. I know most people are short on time. So if there are more questions, we can, like I said, put them in the chat. We can definitely answer them later and we get to them. This will end up being a post, staying on LinkedIn for as long as LinkedIn keeps the post alive. So I do want to thank you, Matt. Really interesting story. In fact, it's what a surprising finding, right? The opposite of what most people would think about, right? When they do some customer discovery and launch a new product. So I hope, everyone who was listening today learned at least one new thing from our conversation. So with that, we're going to wrap up our session. Again, as I said, feel free to continue the discussion afterwards. Enter your comments, your questions in the chat. And also, please stay tuned for our next Product Insiders event right here on LinkedIn. And until next time, I'm your host, Zach Lyons with Agile Innovation Advisors. So take care, everybody.